Joining me now is Ivo Daalder, a former US ambassador to NATO. Appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.
So how likely is it that the US military action in Venezuela and the removal of Nicolas Maduro will embolden China and Russia to take the same kind of action in Taiwan and Ukraine, particularly now that the White House is acknowledging the president is considering a range of options to acquire Greenland by military force if necessary?
Well, it's not like either Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin needed a lot of encouragement to think about, let alone act on, taking over some of their neighbors. Of course, that's what in the case of Ukraine, the Russians have been doing since 2014. And in the case of Taiwan, China has been preparing for decades. That said, there are really two reasons why the possibility of some kind of further action, particularly on the part of China, is now more likely. First and most importantly is the United States, with the actions of Venezuela, with the threats against Colombia, Mexico, and Greenland, seems to be saying, listen, strong power should be able to do what they want, particularly in their own neighborhood. And that sends a signal to the Chinese and to the Russians that they are the strong powers in their neighborhood, and they should be doing what they would want to do. And the second reason is that the United States may be biting off a little bit more than it can chew. It's one thing to move into Venezuela and take out somebody like Maduro, although militarily quite a complicated mission, but it's quite another thing to, quote, run the country, which is what the president has said he would do, and then take on others in Colombia or in Mexico. Our record in running other countries is not a particularly good one. So we may be very busy in our own hemisphere, leaving the road open for countries like Russia and China to do what they want to do in their hemisphere.
Right, and Fiona Hill, a Russia expert at the Brookings Institution and previously the senior director for European and Russian affairs at the White House during part of President Trump's first term, told a congressional hearing back in 2019 that Russia quietly signaled it was ready to cut loose its ally Nicolas Maduro in exchange for the United States stepping back from Ukraine. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I don't think that's really what's going on. I don't think Russians were in a position to prevent the United States from doing what it did with regard to Maduro. I don't think the Russians were part of the military operation, and they condemned it quite strongly. They, in fact, may be able to put a Spaniard in our works here to make life a little bit more difficult. But I do think that what Fiona Hill was talking about was a Russian interest in saying, why don't we divide the world into spheres of influence, in which we get the European sphere, China, of course, gets the Asian sphere, and the United States gets the Western Hemisphere. The only problem with that is there's no reason for the United States to cede its influence in Asia and Europe, although that is in some ways what the United States is now doing when it's saying we should control our hemisphere and do so even if it gets into conflict with our allies, say Denmark, over the issue of Greenland, for example.
So what impact has Donald Trump's military action in Venezuela, and of course his threats to take Greenland, had on the world order? And is Trump ushering in a new era of colonialism and imperialism?
Well, he's certainly ushering in an end to the kind of rules-based order that the United States since 1945 has been creating and then maintaining, an order that says there are certain rules about how states behave with regard to each other, an order that says that working together with like-minded countries is more likely to be beneficial for not only the United States, but for the rest of the world as well, and returning to a kind of old-fashioned power politics in which as back in the times of the Greeks, the strong will do as they will, and the weak will do as they must. And it's that kind of order where we are emphasizing that power, particularly military power, is what matters. That suggests that we're going to be dividing the world into strong countries, each having their own spheres of influence, and weak countries having to do what they want. The problem with that is that we now live in a world that is far more complicated, and even small countries can make big trouble for large countries. We saw it in Afghanistan, we saw it in Iraq. I hope we're not going to learn it in Venezuela, but if we're going to try to do what we tried to do in Iraq and Afghanistan, I fear we're going to run up into the same kinds of problems. Sometimes power, as expressed in pure military capability or even economic coercion, just isn't enough to get what you want.
Ivo Daalder, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.